Perfect.
Awesome. Okay. Wow. Um, Thank you for having me. And um, I've enjoyed like working with you all. And as Jackie knows, who's also on this call, it's really great to see someone there I talk to regularly on this call. I'm just really honored that you all are going on this journey with our movement to help our movement be better. Um, and so with that, I'm going to talk about what I'm doing, because I know many of you probably don't even know what I'm talking about. Maybe you do. Okay. Um, and just so you know, I have a little doggy here who has had some health issues and is very needy and keeps trying to jump in my lap, and I keep trying to put her down. So that my attention might be a little distracted. Okay. So I am the type of person, when I do these kinds of talks, I am totally fine with questions and interruptions, and also making space. So if you have a question during what I'm saying, I just ask that you use the reaction feature at the bottom that will raise your hand and move you to the top of the screen. I can't talk and look at the chat at the same time. And so I don't want people to get offended if I don't call on them. So if you have a question, please do that. And you could try to raise your hand too, and I might see that, but there's a lot of people here. Okay, so my name is Rabbi Sandra Lawson. I graduated from RRC in 2018, and until March of last year, almost a year ago, I was the Associate Chaplain for Jewish Life at Elon University. Throughout my time at RRC, I faced racial bias, racial discrimination, or whatever you want to call it, in hiring for internships. And I also faced microaggressions in RRC, and I can define those if that needs to be. And so I'll just say like microaggressions are kind of like light racism. And in the outside of RRC, I also faced bold racism in the hiring process. And when I was ordained, I applied for, which I was well qualified for, 2 rabbinic positions in congregations. And one of them was a Reform congregation, and one of them was one of our congregations, a Reconstructionist congregation. In both settings, my name was put forward to be, in the first setting, my name was put forward to be the rabbi of the congregation. A lot of people got really upset about that. That fell through. And in the second one, I was a finalist, but racial bias was heavily influenced the decision of that congregation. And they actually wound up making a wrong decision, and that rabbi that they hired did not last. So I was working at Elon University as the associate chaplain. And as you all know, the world changed in ways that none of us could have imagined. And during the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic, we all watched on a variety of screens because we were all locked. We watched a lot of things happen. We watched racial protests, Black Lives Matter protest. We watched a man in Georgia get lynched when 3 white men chased him down because they felt entitled to do that. We also listened to the 911 call of Breonna Taylor's boyfriend trying to figure out why people are in his apartment and they just killed his fiance. And then the kicker that really shifted everyone's focus was we watched a man on video be murdered by law enforcement officers. There were other cases, but those 3 kind of, because they happen in close proximity, really shaped the narrative for our society. And particularly with George Floyd, many people who were white or benefit from white privilege realized that people who kind of often look for other reasons why horrible things happen to Black people, or why Black people stop, or why police stop Black and brown people, we're at a loss because no matter what they thought of, they watched a man being murdered for allegedly a $20 counterfeit. So as a Black rabbi, a rabbi of color, who also has a background in sociology, someone who also worked in law enforcement, who's also in the military, that's all me in that one bio. I was being called and allowed to talk and to help the Jewish community understand this particular moment in time. Like in one day, I did a talk for rabbis in Israel to help them understand. I did a talk in California, Jewish organization in California, and a few hours later, I was with some federation on the East Coast somewhere, all helping people understand this moment in time because people were really hurting and didn't understand. And I did a lot of speaking and talking, and I was committed to doing that because I figured sooner or later white people would stop caring about this issue. And then after a while, I was less interested in giving speeches to help people feel better about themselves and then continue to go on about their day. I wanted to really actively do something. So with that, I contacted our movement, and I helped find funding for this job, which, if you guys know how funding works, don't worry, I have job security. My job is secure, but I did find the initial funding for this role and created this role, which is called Racial Diversity, the Inaugural Director of Racial Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I had two things that I insisted on. One, I didn't want to move. I didn't want to go back to Philadelphia. I'd spent all the time in Philadelphia. I really wanted to be in the South. My wife likes the South. We like the weather. So I didn't want to move. Plus, our movement is, national and global. So I didn't have to be in Philadelphia. The other thing is I wanted to find a way, I didn't even know how I was going to do it, find a way to figure out where our congregations are on racial justice, on racism, because we're all over the place. In some of my conversations with people will say, I'm not racist. And then I start digging, or people say I'm not racist, or our congregation is not racist, and we're wonderful and inclusive. By the way, I believe in my heart of hearts that every congregation wants to be welcoming and inclusive. I don't think people are running around saying we don't want to welcome people. I don't think that at all. But in doing some digging, I found out that some of our congregations are not as welcoming as I think they are. And on the flip side, some of our other congregations who don't think they're doing a lot are actually doing all the things they're supposed to do. And so in working with thriving communities, so Jackie and I both sit, part of my role is working in thriving communities, and I also work in the president's office. But in working with thriving communities, I want to be able to give congregations tools to be more inclusive, to be more welcoming, to be less racist, and to help with our mission of striving towards anti-racism. At the same time, Reconstructing Judaism was creating a strategic plan, and so part of the strategic plan has anti-racism stuff woven into it. All right, that's background. All right, any questions? Okay, great. So the next thing, so when I started this job, like I said, I wanted to find a way to assess our congregations. And so from March until the Hagim, I started drafting this tool. And then after Yom Kippur and working with Deborah Waxman and Tresha Greer, we put together a draft of an assessment tool, and we decided we needed congregations to help us with this. And your congregation was one of those that was chosen. The four congregations represent the diversity of the Reconstructionist movement. We have a congregation. We have a congregation we're assessing that's in Ottawa, Canada. Osei Shalom, you guys. JRC in Evanston, and Kandima in the Pacific Northwest. And this tool is beta, it's a pilot, and your leadership, members of your leadership team have been working with me and assessing themselves on where they are and how they can be more welcoming and inclusive. So, so what is this tool? This tool uses the values of Heshbon and Nefesh, which is something we do during the month of Elul, to sort of an accounting of our soul, to figure out where we may have missed the mark, when we can do better, and sort of atone for future mistakes, but sort of an internal accounting of our souls. Also uses values-based decision-making, which I know you guys have been talking about. And so what happens is that a small group of your leaders are working together. And first of all, the first assignment is to read the strategic plan, particularly section 4 of our strategic plan. And then the next step is they have to meet with me, and I walk them through the assessment. And then the first thing that they do is a group. They have some reading that they have to do that come from one of our properties, Evolve. And then in their first meeting, they come together and they talk about those writings and what came up with for them. The two required articles are one written by myself and Rabbi Donna Cephas, and the other one is one written by Rabbi Joshua Lesser. The article by me talks about racism in our Jewish communities. And the one written by Joshua Lesser talks about how to prepare our congregations for discussions on racism and how to make our communities welcoming. Then the next thing that happens is that there's this essay, or this checklist written by the Multiracial Jewish Network. It was created a few years ago, over a decade ago, actually, that's based off of Dr. Peggy McIntosh's work, which is unpacking white privilege. And this checklist that was created by the Multiracial Network looks at white and our Ashkenazi privilege in our Jewish community. The leadership comes together, they talk about that, they do the checklist. And in the next meeting, based off of what they learned from that checklist, they then walk through your properties, you walk through your synagogues, and you try to imagine what the space is like for people coming in your doors and what that space is like for people of color. And from the feedback that I've gotten, that seems to be the most fun part of this tool, is walking through and just imagining, what it must look like for people of color. And then the last part is something I got from the URJ, the Union for Reform Judaism. And it's a tool that looks at racism in your community and asks you to ask a bunch of questions there. So what's going to happen next is your community has finished this project. They have a survey. They will present what they learned about themselves at our convention. And you all are going to help our movement make a better assessment tool so that someday, soon, the rest of our congregations can use this. And also, it may go out into the larger world. I had a conversation yesterday with someone from our team that is helping me make it prettier. So that it'll be more user-friendly and we can then send it out. All right, as someone who spends a lot of time talking about this, I also understand that some things I say may need more clarity. So if there's a question that you all have, I'm happy to answer it. And also Jackie, who has had several conversations with me about this. Jack, if you ever want to jump in during this, if you're still here, I can't see you anymore. But yeah.
I have a question.
Hi, Alan. How are you?
Very well, Rabbi Sandra. Thank you. I've been very involved over the years with RAC, Religion
Mhm.
Action Center.
Mhm.
You've mentioned the Reform movement a number of times.
Mhm.
And Rabbi Saberstein was one of my
Mhm.
great models,
Mhm.
great orator, as well as being able to communicate well. Do you see that the Reconstructionist movement and the Reform movement have done enough collaboration on the very issues you're talking about so that you don't have to recreate the wheel? And I've seen it happen with the conservative movement too,
Mhm.
because Rabbi Saberstein spent much time speaking to many of the very influential conservative
Mhm.
movement synagogues in his last years of service to the RAC organization. So if you can address a little bit of that, and where's that going, and what do you see happening?
Yeah, so I totally agree with you about the whole not wanting to recreate the wheel. One of the first meetings I had that I didn't even understand how it was happening was with Jonah Presser and my counterpart in the URJ, and they were throwing around letters and acronyms. I think I texted Deborah Waxman like, what do these things mean? But I'm really grateful for that meeting because it was an opportunity for both of our movements to work together on this issue. And we have strengths, and Jonah made that clear. We have strengths that the URJ needs. And the URJ has strengths that we need. And one of the reasons why I'm using their material, I'm not saying it's perfect, but it was good enough to start this process. And when I saw it, I'm like, can we use this? And they're like, absolutely. And I have regular conversations with my counterpart at the URJ, Yolanda, and we talk a lot and we share resources and we talk. And there's other members of her team that I'm blanking on. But historically, I can't speak on the amount of collaboration, but we are definitely collaborating because our movements agree that this is too big for one movement to do on their own. And I also hope that at some point, the conservative movement will join these conversations. They're not ready. They're not ready at this moment. Their hearts are in the right place, but they got a lot of other things they have to deal with. But sooner or later, I hope that they also will join us. So I hope that helps. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Sherry, I see Sherry's hand.
Sorry, just trying to unmute. I was just wondering, it's not really a question. The two articles that you referenced that you made available to the 4 participating congregations, is that something that you can share with the larger community? I would love to see those.
Yeah, so
Magically,
yeah, you
just
totally
been
can share.
shared.
Yeah, I see Robert Josh raise his hand. So all the articles come from Evolve, which is one of our properties. And so if you go to Evolve's website, you'll see not just the required readings, but you'll see some of the optional readings because sometimes people like to do extra credit. And so I wanted to make sure that people had more readings. So there's 2 that are required. Like I said, one written by myself and Rabbi Donna Cephas, and the other one by Rabbi Joshua Lesser. And then there's optional readings, one by our president and other Jews of color. And so Josh and or whoever else in this community wants to share them can. Also the checklist from the Jewish Multiracial Network is also shareable because it's public. It's public information, so that's also can be shared. And soon you all will see hopefully the final product, but it's just not ready. I'm happy to talk about it, but I'm concerned about it when it leaves my hands and goes out, and who knows what will happen to it, because part of the thing that's working right now with the assessment tools, the congregations are working very, very closely with me.
So I might add that I'd invite everyone to take a look at those links to the articles that Josh has put in the chat. And I envision that as we're just starting down this road, we're likely to have at least one, probably a series of discussions or Shabbaton, or we'll see how it evolves to get broader discussion around this. And I envision this is going to be with us, a process we're going to be on for years to come. At least I hope and am committed to making that happen. So we are really at the beginning of this. And so I also invite you all to read through that, and we're going to be looking for others to join in to the work group going forward. So if you're interested in that, please get in touch with Josh or myself.
And the other thing I want to say too is, and forgive me, Jackie, because we haven't had a lot of conversations about what I'm about to say. We have had some, but when the congregations are done with this tool, and then they present at the convention, my vision is that this will help your congregation and your liaison, which in this case is Jackie. And Jackie and I will be working together to help you all figure out what you need next, and to make sure that we're getting you all the right information to help you move forward. Because this work is an ongoing work. There's no finish line for the foreseeable future. And we want to make sure that you guys have all the information that you need, so we'll know what the information that we gather will help you going forward. Jean, hi.
Hi, this is exciting, and I haven't been paying close enough attention, I guess, to correspondence from the congregation to know how much has already gone into this in terms of piloting and building out this tool. And I'm curious whether embedded in the tool or in the recruitment of these 4 synagogues and the groups within the synagogues that are doing this initial development, are there best practices for making that invitation as inclusive as possible? Because it seems like the action planning that'll grow out of this and how it moves forward. I'm just not sure how those communications originated, and as we go forward to be as effective as we can with that, in terms of who's shepherding the next phase. Have we done everything we should be doing to make that invitation inclusive?
Right. So that's, I mean, I totally I think I understand where you're coming from. And this part of the process was designed for the leadership of every congregation. And the reason is that like I said, from March to the beginning of the Hagim, I had a lot of conversations with people across denominations, like seriously across. I had a conversation with a Black Chabad rabbi to like the URJ and the renewal movement and everybody in between. And I talked with people who have been doing this work long before it was cool to do this work, to find out what was working. And one of the things that I discovered a lot, but like one of the things that makes what I'm doing different from what the URJ is doing, the URJ is creating DEI working groups, like diverse equity inclusion working groups. The leadership of the congregation is in my model, the leadership is the DEI group, because in my conversations with folks, DEI groups that are a subset of the congregation do not do enough to change the culture of the congregation. So I'm asking for the leadership to invest in the culture change. And then also for rabbis who feel less equipped to talk about this, it's very pluralistic and very reconstructionist for the rabbis to be learning at the same time as their congregations. Now, going forward after this, absolutely, with using values-based decision-making and bringing in more voices will help shepherd like going forward. But now your leadership is invested in this and will ensure, that's my hope anyway, will ensure that this goes forward. I hope that helps. And for those of you who all want to see my dog, because she's anyway, so she has I mean, I shouldn't share, but there's something wrong with her butthole. And she's on a variety of medicines. That's probably not what you guys want to hear. Okay. Alan, did you have another question? Or Jean, did that answer your question? Or was that helpful?
Yeah, thank you. That is interesting.
Rabbi Lawson, I wondered if I could.
Hey, I know you.
Yeah, how you doing? I wondered if we could hear from the members of the committee that you're meeting with what some of their initial reactions to the process has been.
Absolutely. Who wants to go? I saw Elliot a moment ago. There he is. I see him. He's on my right side. And so there's like Elliot, Josh, and
Down
Andy.
here, something that came up just now made me think that since we're opening up the shul for more services in person, you said it was one of the fun parts, and it was going around the building and looking and seeing where we are in regards to how we present our building, and I think that's a wonderful thing for everybody to do. Next time you're in the building, just look around and think about how this looks to people of color. Perhaps if somebody Sephardic came in our shul, anyone, how are we presenting our physical appearance to people? So that is an interesting thing we can all do. My reaction was that we have a mixed bag. We have some things that are okay, but we have a long way to go in making our shul a place where everyone would feel comfortable coming in. And I'm glad that we're embarking on ways to do that.
Thank you, Elliot.
Great.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I just want to, I think, Elliot, you're absolutely right to invite people to try and walk through this building that many of us are so familiar with, that it's hard to look at it in a fresh way. But I think from the moment you approach the building, come inside and see that display case to the left, and what's in there, and what is that saying about us, who we are, what are our values that are sort of enshrined in that case, and then walking forward into into the sanctuary. What are the values there? There's flags there. Are those the flags that we want to be giving a message to those who come in, and are we being, as we think we are, as welcoming and inclusive throughout our building? I think there's this, whether it's the physical part, the liturgy, the songs, it really has a strong, obvious connection to the shtetl life, the Eastern European background, and it doesn't tap much into the richness and the tapestry of the Jewish world outside of that we, I suggest, would be, that we have a lot to learn from. And with that, I could go on, but I check in with Rabbi Josh and see his comment.
Sure, thanks. One of the, I don't think we've named the value yet of empathy, but clearly that's, from what Rabbi Sandra was saying, and from what Elliot was outlining, of bringing different eyes to think of, about our space, and also about how Jews of color are greeted or welcomed, and for those of us who are white to really, to empathize, to put ourselves into their situations and what, they might be receiving. And I wanted to, there was one of the article that Rabbi Sandra and Rabbi Donna Cephas wrote. There was a section that Rabbi Cephas shared about her family that really impacted, when we read it as a group in our education process. We spoke about it for a while. It impacted a number of us, and I wanted to just read that for you, because it gives a sense of how each of us has the choice in terms of how we receive someone and how we respond to them when they enter our community. So Rabbi Cephas is married to an African-American man, And she writes about how her nuclear family, she has 2 children, can't rely on being comfortably accepted in all Jewish settings. And so she says, for many Jews, we're a problem. When we walk through some Jewish doors, we confound expectations. People see different skin colors and presume intermarriage. We are aware that they don't know what to do with us. At my younger daughter's Hillel, she was asked if she knew what was going on and what she was doing when she put on her talit and kippah. Students who are Jewish have told her she can't be Jewish. She must be half Jewish or not Jewish at all. When my older daughter was 11, a man wearing a kippah approached her and asked her why she was wearing a Jewish star. My daughter replied, "I'm Jewish." This man told her how funny it was to him that she could be Jewish. Recently, my daughter told my husband that was the day she took off her Star of David, and she has not worn it again. While traveling in Israel with other American Jewish students, she was told how funny it was to them that she is Jewish. This type of impertinent questioning and intrusive commenting continues for both of my daughters. And so, one of the elements of say the materials lifted up, educating our community around. This is an example of the very specific, kind of granular example of the type of microaggressions that Jews of color often are subject to when they enter majority white Jewish spaces, and so this is, we'll be starting to kind of, make sure we're all on the same page as a community about this. Rabbi Joshua Lesser's article has a great series of 5 kind of guidelines, do's and don'ts to help prevent these kinds of microaggressions that often happen. And I'll close with kind of bringing this issue back into the values language, because there's a kind of values tension here that is interesting to note, that many of us feel like, we're curious people, right? Curiosity is a value, and curiosity is a really great value. But part of the empathy piece is understanding that, for many Jews of color, when it's their 20th time being in a Jewish space and being questioned about, oh, how are you Jewish? Where did you convert? Or that curiosity is really not experienced as curiosity. It's experienced as very, very hurtful. So part of that stepping into the empathy piece is saying okay, I may bracket my curiosity for initially meeting someone or shift in a different direction. So these are some of the things that we started to kind of immerse ourselves in and think about and explore as a group.
So Josh, thank you so much for that. And it just reminded me of something else I want to share. This is an urgent issue. Every study that's come out in the last 20 years, but I'm going to just focus my attention on the last 2. One was by the Pew study and one was by the Jock Initiative folks. I can't think of the actual title. And all of these studies show that the number of Jews of color are growing in our society. And Jews in America are becoming more racially diverse. Why? Because the longer Jews live in the United States, they start to look like a subset of the population. So whatever statistic demographic you see outside of the Jewish community, you're going to start to see within the Jewish community. 2 things I want you to understand is that the Pew study, for example, has something that's very interesting that other studies don't say, which is that 15% of Jews under 30 are racially diverse. That's a lot of people. And the Jock Initiative study has something interesting too. Their study, they interviewed Jews of color. 1 in 3 Black Jews converted. So the majority of Jews of color, majority of Black Jews in the United States are not converts to Judaism. So we need to stop. Assuming that when you see a person of color, they converted into Judaism. And in my conversations that I referenced earlier with the Chabad rabbi, the Black Chabad rabbi I mentioned is a wonderful man, and I hope to continue talking with him. With him and my conversations with, let's say, Isaiah Goldstein Stoll, who's a Black rabbi from the Reform movement, that we get messages regularly from Jews of color who are frustrated. They want to be part of the Jewish experience. They want to experience Jewish life, but are fed up with entering Jewish spaces because the amount of armor that they have to put on are the things that they have to deal with. And this is so, the reason I'm bringing this up is that people are opting out. And so these are people who want to be engaged. So we are 1.9% of the American population. We cannot afford to lose people who actually want to participate. And when I said that this is urgent, it's because if we don't get this right, we're going to lose talent. We're going to lose future rabbis like myself. We're going to lose future education directors, future cantors, future leaders of the Jewish community. And that's just not something I don't think any of us want.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear from different folks about what values they are hearing and feeling about needing to bring into this space so that we can start to collect some of these things as we figure out our path forward.
I see a hand attached to someone named George, but I don't think you're George. But if you are, that's great.
George is now, his block says Holly. So it's a pleasure to finally meet you, Rabbi Sandra. I've heard so many wonderful things about you. One of my questions is, is the work that is being done enlightening mostly Ashkenazic white Jews, and that all other peoples are being represented through, I was going to say, your office? And the reason I asked the question is twofold. One is remembering 40 years ago at the Reform Synagogue that I was a part of in California, 1 year of all the babies that came into that community, half of them were Chinese females because of the China policy. And I remember our congregation saying, isn't this great? Because people aren't going to be able to just, funny, you don't look Jewish, it was that sort of. So I'm wondering how broad is the, because people do walk up to people that just don't look like them and say the stupidest things. I actually had just as an aside, in a Reform synagogue, which I hadn't belonged to till I married my husband, because my name is Holly, they were wondering if I was the non-Jew, because almost every couple at the synagogue had one Jewish and one non-Jewish partner. And I was like, that's just a weird thing to say to somebody. And I couldn't imagine, I just thought it was weird. I can't even imagine the person across from me looking at me, looking different than them and saying something even, I can't think of anything but stupider, or not even thinking about how you'd make another person feel. Anyway, I'm looking forward to your answer.
So, and if you need more information, please ask. So one of the things I'm really trying to do is to change the culture. And so since race is so obvious, this will affect how we approach other people when they come into our community. I have a colleague, his name is Rabbi Nick, and he gets, his full name is Nicholas, and he's a white guy. He gets a lot around how are you Jewish, but he also understands it's still very different than my experience. And so a few Torah portions back, I'm going to be rabbi for a minute, for a few Torah portions back in Mishpatim, there's a phrase, we're on that mountain and we accept revelation, we accept the commandments. And the Torah says, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do, and then we will learn. And so the rabbis have a lot of commentary on why isn't learning first and then doing later? And because we're people that do. And so my hope is to like help our congregations understand what to do. This is how you are inclusive. This is what you do. And then the learning will also come through that process. I hope that was helpful. Great. Hi, Evan.
Hi, Rabbi Sandra. It's really nice to finally meet you.
Yeah.
So I really am glad you brought that up with the idea of doing first and then learning, because because somebody asked about, values, I feel like the most basic value here is kavod, respect, because so often I see that, well, I just want to learn, I'm just curious, as an excuse to be disrespectful to people and to treat people as a curiosity rather than as a human being with feelings who is just trying to worship or just trying to have lunch. And yeah, and that idea of sometimes you don't need to understand, you can just listen and hear, I don't like it when you do that, it makes me feel unwelcome or unsafe when you do that, don't do that, and then figure out the learning part later. So thank you for bringing that up also.
You're welcome. The other thing I want to say too, that this is when people say, I'm just curious, when Jews of color walk into a synagogue and are met with questions like, how are you Jewish? When did you convert? Things like, and I've had people say that to me without even like introducing themselves to me. It's actually not about curiosity. And let me tell you why. If it's curiosity and I give you a boundary, then you respect that boundary. If it's about respecting you, if you don't respect the boundary, that means you don't respect me. So if I'm walking into a synagogue and people ask me inappropriate questions and I say, I'm just here to pray, I really don't want to have a conversation, I don't know who you are or whatever, and you push that boundary by telling me I need to know, it's not about curiosity. It's about you need to feel safe before I come into your synagogue. And that is something I want you all to understand, because this is not, people will cover it up in curiosity, but the curiosity is more about trying to make sure how I fit in, why I am present, or somebody making somebody else feel safe. So I just want you all to understand. Hi, Eric.
Hey, Rabbi, thank you very much. This is really great. And I hope you feel welcomed by our small little community. I think the root of the problem that you experienced, and that a lot of us experienced in the 60s when we were younger and had issues with anti-Semitism and experienced the whole Martin Luther King, the whole transition then. Is that there's a lot of people that are just willfully ignorant. They just they want to stay in their own little box, if you will. And what I think Oseh Shalom is about is really a community that's inclusive on an individual basis, is looking at each person as different. It's not, it's education and it's cultural change. And I feel optimistic actually about it. I think it's getting better. Even though it's, transitions are painful, I think it's getting better. My question to you is, what was your childhood like? Where were you raised, and how did you evolve to decide to become a rabbi?
So Eric, I thank you for your question, and I'm not offended by the question, but I don't think this is the right time for the question, because that's not what I was asked to do. And so if you and I want to talk at another time, that's totally fine. But I'm just pausing that because that's not what I was asked to do, and I want to be respectful of your leadership that asked me to come.
Okay, I'm just curious. I'm kidding. I'm just.
No, it's totally fine. And like I said, I'm really not offended by it because I understand here I am, and this is what we're talking about. It's just like, I just don't think this is the right space. Hi, Alan.
Alan.
Hi.
Hey.
Eric, you did it. That's exactly what you do. You have an opportunity where you share something about yourself, And that leads to the conversation where it becomes, you're not putting a pointer on somebody you would like to know more about. It's a matter of the questions that you ask or the conversation that flows. And over the years, I tend to be a little bit more extroverted, so it's very easy for me. But when you're coming into your own space, your community space, and you're comfortable and you see somebody who's new, it doesn't make a difference if they're of a color or they're coming from an Ashkenazi shtetl background or whatever. It's feeling comfortable that you want to share something that you have in commonality. So usually out of the process of the conversation, and Rabbi, tell me if you disagree with me, that's where you end up having that important values and that important interaction that makes people feel comfortable that you really care. It's a caring community. It takes skill. I mean, you have to work at it. It's not easy to go into a new situation or if you join a new community. And also for you on your end, if you're part of a community for a long time, to kind of offer a little something about yourself. Everybody is very curious about everybody else. I mean, that's just being human. I don't see it necessarily a color issue. I don't see it really as a racial issue. Here in Howard County, we have courageous conversations going on right now. This is the 5th year I've been involved with it. Every single year, the conversations in my group have gotten deeper and deeper and deeper, not because of the kinds of questions there were posed. They were always good questions that we were asked to talk in our group, but it was because we're getting more comfortable dealing with the issue of talking to different people from different faith backgrounds. So it's a comfort level, it's a conversation level, and we all have to kind of put our toes into the deep water and all engage in it together.
Thank you, Alan. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Rabbi Sandra. Really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So my head's swirling a little bit. Some of you were involved in a conversation that a similar Zoom conversation we were having a few weeks ago about the building security and whether we should have greeters at the door and this kind of thing. So the discussion about, walking into the synagogue and seeing it through the eyes of a person of color and trying to yourself in someone else's shoes, which I think is a great exercise across the boards. It's interesting to me. It's that many of us were involved in a very different conversation a couple of weeks back, and I'm trying to understand how much we were thinking about. I think it certainly came up in that conversation, the question of being inclusive and open to diversity, and how's it defined? Who is a person that is other as a person, and what does it mean to be welcoming at a time when people are fearful? And I don't have an answer. I just sort of make an observation that we're having these sort of, there's a tension, I think, in some of the discussions that we're having, and in our values that are pulling us in directions to be more closed and parochial out of fear or anxieties about otherness, and wanting to be welcoming and inclusive at the same time, and an awareness of that. And so I think it's really interesting. It's an interesting arc of our discussion for those of you particularly that were involved in the earlier discussion to try to grab back and think about that and be informed about what we're talking about now, and think through that ongoing discussion about building security as well, and how we greet people, particularly how we deal with people who are maybe new to the community, that don't fit a preconceived notion of what it is to be a member of this community. So I think this is wonderful. I think this is a perfect time, particularly because of the other discussion we've been having.
Yeah, and I'll say that, the values-based decision making is probably the best tool that I can think of right now on how to figure out security. And whatever you all decide about security, the process should be transparent and include as many diverse voices in your community and also should include members outside of your community, because like, if there's, churches down the street, which there probably are, I've never been to your space, but like the conversation security should also include people who are part of the larger community as well. And I am beginning conversations with Maurice, Rabbi Maurice, who's working on, who's talking about security issues. And so anyway, I just want to say that, and I'm clumsy about that because it's not fully formed, but thank you for bringing that up, Bill. Hi, Evan again. Hi.
I don't want to take up too much time because I know we're running over, but I wanted to share an anecdote real quick because Bill raised the thing about security. I had an experience a few years ago where I was driving, trying to get to Osei Shalom, got lost, pulled over at some random synagogue I'd never been to, and I had my son with me. We ran up to the door, and there were, I guess, security outside the door. There were two armed gentlemen standing outside who kind of were questioning me before I went in, and I just had to say like, well, I belong to Osei Shalom, but I got lost. I'm trying to get in because it was one of the Shabbat where you're supposed to listen to a really particular haftarah, and they let me in. Because I look in such a way that they talked to me for 2 seconds and went, oh, he's Jewish. And without really having any reason to think that other than I named another synagogue. And I just, granted this is an assumption on my part, but I have a really hard time imagining that a Jew of color would have had the same experience. And even for me, it was scary. But again, they spoke to me for 5 seconds and then went, okay, and let me in. And I think whenever I hear about security, and especially the idea of having sort of people posted outside, that's what I think of. So just something to think about.
I wanted to let everyone know we only have about 3 or 4 minutes before we have to close our session.
Yeah, and Evan, I think what you're raising there is speaks to a couple of things. One, I think, would be Ashkenazi privilege, like in its finest example there of how you're able to give a very brief sort of explanation and you get a pass.
And the funny part is I'm not Ashkenazi, I'm just white.
Right. Close enough, though, for their purposes. So bringing it back to values and how we are, this is a true challenge for us about, we've got conflicting values in wanting to be inclusive and how we approach that, and yet wanting to maintain security at the same time. And so fortunately, Rabbi Sandra and Rabbi Maurice are going to figure this all out and give us, hand it to us on a silver platter. Yay. No, but I think we hope to get some guidance from them, just as with this process. But as you can see, Rabbi Sandra has led us, provided the pathway for us to follow and figure this out for our own congregation. And so I imagine you can now see how this is going to have to be an ongoing conversation. What we bring into it, what are the values that are going to lead, how we're going to make changes, and how it's going to define who we are going forward. So, Rabbi.
I saw Holly's hand up too, real quick. I don't know if you still had a question.
Oh, I saw George. Yeah.
You referred to section 4, and I was like, what is that?
Oh, so yeah. If you go to Robert Josh has the links, but if you go to reconstructingjudaism.org, somewhere on their website is our strategic plan. And then, I encourage reading all of it. And I also understand that is a lot for some people. As far as strategic plans go, it is not the longest. And there's also an executive summary. And for the purposes of the work that I'm doing with your congregation, section 4 is more relevant.
Sue, did you have a quick comment before we jump back?
I did just have a quick question, thinking, maybe steps ahead, but looking at the idea that this is, a goal and a mission or a process of diversity and inclusion, I'm wondering if that also incorporates the concepts of outreach and recruitment for, like membership, like how communities, congregations go about doing that.
Oh yeah,
in
yeah.
an appropriate manner.
I mean, it's part of like that's down the road, but this also will inform your thinking around that.
Yeah.
And, I'll just give you an example. So the one that's closest in my mind right now, RRC has a new dean, a wonderful biblicist, wonderful academic, but is not someone who would have been on anyone's radar because people tend to pick from the same pools of people. And so when RRC broadened its network of folks to look for, we got a wonderful candidate who would have been on no one's radar. And so if you don't know about Dr. Amanda Mabubi, I encourage you to go to RRC's website, learn about her. And she's a Black woman, Black family, Black Jewish family. And that's an example of how when you go outside the box and you stop picking from the same pool of people, you'll get a more diverse pool of candidates and you get better qualified candidates. Dr. Amanda beat out a huge, I wouldn't say huge because we're a small group, but was the top candidate after interviewing other folks who were also equally qualified, or also was qualified, but Dr. Amanda Mabubi, won if it's a competition. But to RRC's credit, by casting a wider net of people. So this plays into like recruitment, how you all might recruit board members, how you think about membership and all that stuff by expanding how you think about things.
So maybe this is a good time to regroup with the larger breakouts and come back in. I'm not sure if the other breakout has rejoined this, George and Ray and others.
Yes, we have.
Okay.
Yes, we have.
All right. So I just want to, again, thank Rabbi Sandra for joining, enlightening us in many, many ways, and really appreciate all the input. And I imagine you all will be thinking about this for, and I hope for many days, and share your thoughts. Again, we invite you to join the work group going forward. There's a lot of work to do, and just welcome all that input that makes us richer. So, George, back to you and the team.
I also, before I sign off, I just want to say that thank you for having me. I always enjoy any opportunity I can spend Shabbat with the Jewish community. So I really appreciate it. And I look forward to working with you all some more and hopefully seeing many of you or some of you at the convention. All right. Bye.